Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today, Bryce Simon joins me in NBA free agency, and the trade cycle has kicked off with some madness after 24 hours. It took us a good 12 hours to get rolling, but we've gotten rolling here. We're going to talk about the Jaylen Brown trade. That just occurred within the last hour. It took me an hour to figure out exactly what is going on with that 2028 first-round pick that the Boston Celtics have acquired for Jaylen Brown from the Philadelphia 76ers. We will talk about that. We will certainly talk about everything the Lakers have done from this sign and trade for Walker Kessler, which we talked a little bit about as a potential option yesterday, but man, my goodness, that is something. All the way down to Sandro Mamukelashvili, to Quentin Grimes, to Colin Sexton, everything like that. We'll certainly talk about Tobias Harris. We'll talk about Norman Powell. We will talk about John Collins. We will talk about everyone who signed a deal today. But first, Bryce, what's going on, buddy?
I think we should just recognize that no teams tampered ahead of the moratorium, and that's why the news didn't drop till today. And so we appreciate that very much. Yeah, it's funny. I did think about it. Yesterday there was nothing. There wasn't nothing. Yesterday, we just got to plan on it being the second day, because this is whenever all of the stuff came through and all of the deals started to happen and all the trades started to happen. So lots of moving parts today, lots of deals, some deals. I'm like, okay, what is this setting up for the next thing? Lots to get through. Glad that we went the last couple of days and had all of those things talked about already.
Exactly right. Quick little ad for the Substack, Game Theory, samv.substack.com. Go subscribe. Bryce and I, we will do video breakdowns of maybe some free agents, but more likely to be guys that are draft eligible, guys that are playing in under 17s. Bryce already did. Joakim, we know it's Joakim now. Boomchie. You were right, I believe, and I was wrong. And the people I talked to who may or may not represent Mr. Boomchie were wrong when they spoke to me. But regardless, I will also have something on Nikola Kusturica. I will have something on probably Beckham Black, guys playing the U17s. We will have breakdowns there. And then we will also have breakdowns from Summer League, things like that. Go to the Substack, game3samv.substack.com. Bryce, it's time to talk about the Jaylen Brown trade. I'm going to be honest with you. It felt like to me, when I would talk to people around the league, that the Jaylen Brown thing in Boston was kind of done. And once the Giannis stuff got out, that is. That it was going to be hard to kind of come back from what had happened at the very least. Let's go with that. So I was not surprised to see Jaylen Brown get moved. My immediate reaction to seeing Jaylen Brown got traded for Paul George, 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks was, what in the world is this deal? I was like, wait, it must have been really done with Boston, with Jaylen Brown, because otherwise I would have tried to probably bring him back into the fold and keep him. Then we understood what the pick compensation was. It's a 2031 first round pick that is unprotected from the Philadelphia 76ers. Let's start there. That's the easy pick. The second pick is very much what Keith Smith has reported. I think he's the person that has gotten this the most right. And I'm not saying anybody's gotten it wrong. It's just a really complicated pick. To the point where I was talking to people from both teams and they were explaining it kind of across different ways, and it was very strange. Okay. Boston will get Philadelphia's pick if it lands 1 through 8. The reason that this couldn't just be they get Philadelphia's pick is because that pick is already owed to Brooklyn, protected 1 through 8. Which means that Philadelphia is not going to have its own 2028 first round pick. If it's 9 to 30, Philadelphia's pick is going to Brooklyn. If it's 1 to 8, that pick will go to Boston. If the pick ends up being 9 to 30, the Philadelphia 76ers also owned a 2028 first round pick from the LA Clippers. That pick would then result in Boston getting the most favorable of their own pick and the Clippers pick that Philadelphia owns. Now, the other part of that conversation that is complicated is that Boston's pick is also getting swapped with San Antonio that year as part of the Derek White trade, which means that if Boston ends up picking first, that pick is protected for the selection for the first overall pick. So Boston would get it if Boston is picking number 1. No matter what, Boston gets the most favorable of the Clippers versus Philly. So if the Clippers pick number 1, Boston gets that pick. And then if Philly picks number 1, Boston gets that pick, right? So essentially Boston has all of the upside on the Clippers, on their own pick at number 1, that is, and on Philadelphia. That is the key to why they decided that this was a really valuable pick. And it is indeed, I think, a really valuable pick, if only because the Clippers are now re-entering this like strange sort of rebuild. And yeah, that's why I'm like probably 15 minutes late recording the show. I think we ended up being an hour late, but the Brown thing had happened. It took me quite a while to actually sort through all of the machinations of this pick. The easiest way to explain it is that Boston owns the upside on all of Philly and the Clippers pick now. Those are two really valuable assets because the Clippers are entering their own rebuilding phase with Darius Garland, Brandon Ingram, Keaton Wagner. That team, I think, is not going to be amazing by the time 2028 rolls around, given how strong the Western Conference is. Philadelphia obviously has its own injury issues that could come up with Joel Embiid. Also, by the time 2031 rolls around, Jaylen Brown is a 35-year-old. Joel Embiid would be 37 if he's not already retired. Tyrese Maxey, you don't know what the contract situation will look like. I would imagine VJ Edgecombe will be there. It's actually two really, really valuable picks. I understand why Boston did this now, understanding what those picks are, basically.
We talk about this all the time in terms of first round picks not being created equal, right? That first round pick that's most likely to be in the late, in the 20 to 30 compared to having the upside of these ones, all of that. So I think it always is important context to talk about the upside and the potential and the value of these first round picks. That one is still very confusing, even as you outlined it there. But to me, this still comes down to Boston truly getting to the place where they were no longer interested in having Jaylen Brown on their team. And then the return they were actually able to get in terms of Paul George, who's coming off a very good season in the games that he was able to play, shot the ball extremely well, but isn't nearly the player that Jaylen Brown is, who's coming off a second team All-NBA type season, and then the draft capital that came with it. So it just is interesting to me that one, Boston decided, hey, we are ready to move on from Jaylen Brown. And then two, that this was the best value. I would assume, I would guess that they took the best possible deal they could get, that this was the best value that they were able to get for Jaylen Brown, who was coming off a second team All-NBA season.
Yeah. So it is kind of what my understanding is. This is the best that they could do. The market was not quite as strong as what you would expect.
Real quick, Sam, do you think that that's because of the contract, because of how the league view? We had the whole Jaylen Brown conversation. Neither you or I think he was the seventh best player on the Celtics, but no. I don't think either you or I think he's the sixth best player in the NBA either, right? And maybe not even a top 10 player in the NBA. So what do you think the gap was for teams in the NBA? Do they maybe not even see him as a top 20 player, or is it because of the contract? What do you think that gap is in terms of them not having more teams interested?
It's really more the contract I think it's a combination of things, right?
Sure.
For what it's worth, when I talk to people around the league, I get a really wide range of opinions on Jaylen Brown. There are people who think he's like a legit top 12 player in the league. There are people who think he's more like the 30th best player in the league, I would say. Like somewhere between like 25 and 30. Like a legit all-star, like genuinely an all-star. Like nobody's going to question that. But is more in that ballpark of player, right? When you're on a super-max, so even if you say that he's somewhere in the middle of that for most people, right? Even if you say that he's 15 to 20, let's say. That means that he's a player on a 35% supermax that is one of the 15 to 20 best players in the league. Which to me is probably a contract that is slightly underwater. If you believe that that's who he is. Which is why it ends up being that Paul George is returning in a deal like this, where Paul George is still a good player. Like we saw that in the playoffs. But Paul George is another contract that is actually seen as being quite underwater. It's nowhere near as underwater as the Jaylen Brown contract, obviously. But it is slightly underwater at the end of the day. This has nothing to do with on some level it does have something to do with analytics where people question Jaylen Brown's impact. They don't question it to the point where he's the 7th best player on the Celtics. They don't question it to the point where he's not a top 100 player in the league, right? But I will get a difference of opinion to where he's somewhere between, I would say, the 10th best player in the league for some people down to the 30th-ish best player in the league. And if you think he's more that, the contract is not worthwhile.
And in this era of this CBA, don't you feel like if you're on a supermax, you probably need to be the number one option on your team? Don't you feel like it's hard to build a team with 2 supermax contracts?
It is exceptionally hard to do so. And now that can get us to Philadelphia on this side. We'll talk about Boston a little bit more in a second here in terms of whether or not this was the right move. But on the Philadelphia side, they now have that because Joel Embiid Supermax kicks in. They now have Jaylen Brown Supermax that is kicking in. And they have Tyrese Maxey as well, who is quite expensive, obviously. I still think this is the right move for them. And I still like this deal a little bit more for Philadelphia than I do for Boston. I understand why Boston did it on some level. I think those picks are really valuable, actually. But I do think that this deal makes more sense for Philadelphia, and here's the reason why. Obviously, in the regular season, Philadelphia, when Joel Embiid would miss time, didn't always have enough creation, didn't always have enough playmaking ability on the court. With Jaylen Brown, that ends. Jaylen Brown, by and large, especially last year, but by and large is very reliable to play at least 65 games in a year. You look at his last 5 years, 66 games, 67 games, 70 games, 63 games, 71 games. A couple years before that, he was at 58 and 57. I think one of those might have been the 71 game year. But then the 3 seasons that he started his career, 78, 70, 74. So Jaylen Brown plays, right? Like that's a big thing and a big factor with Paul George, given that Paul George is a little bit older at this point. To me, what this does is it gives the Philadelphia 76ers a much higher ceiling in the regular, or a much higher floor rather, in the regular season.
Yep.
As long as Jaylen Brown and Tyrese Maxey are healthy, this team wins 50 games next year, which I think is really important. You could have Joel Embiid play 50-ish games next year, and I think this team probably wins 50 games in the Eastern Conference.
I agree. This was my biggest takeaway as well, Sam, because I just was like, in the non-Embiid minutes and games, Jaylen Brown is so much more valuable in that scenario than what Paul George is, because Paul George just doesn't have as much of that in his game anymore. Where I'm interested in is how much the minutes together, the games together. I've tried to figure out what it's going to look like when they are healthy. Jaylen Brown playing off of Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, and how all of that meshes together with the trio. And I'm a little, obviously it's extremely talented. I'm a little less sold on how smooth that is going to be. And that's what ultimately is going to decide their ceiling. But I agree with you 100% that the floor of this team's regular season absolutely was raised with this move.
Yeah. I also think that their ceiling in the playoffs is raised as well, for what it's worth. Jaylen Brown is a significant upgrade on Paul George at this point. I think Paul George is probably a little bit underrated now. I actually think Paul George is still better defensively than what Jaylen Brown is. I thought he was really quite good in the playoffs defensively, for what it's worth. But offensively, I think there's just a drastic difference in Jaylen's ability to get to the rim. The other piece of this is something that we talked about during the pre-draft process as well, right? Because Joel Embiid is so much more of a perimeter player now, frankly, than what he had been previously. And because they just went out and signed Dean Wade to a 4-year, $39 million deal, and he can really knock down shots from the corner. This is actually kind of an interesting 5-out setting that allows Jaylen Brown to continue to get to the rim really effectively and to be that downhill driver playmaker while not necessarily having to be the true number one option all of the time. Now, what I'm most interested in, frankly, is seeing how the synergy between Jaylen Brown and Joel Embiid develops in ball screens as playmakers in like bench units or whatever and things like that, right? Maybe they use Jaylen Brown as their second unit playmaker with bench units, right? You have Jaylen Brown come out at the 6-minute mark. You play Maxey and Embiid for like the first 9 minutes of the game. Joel Embiid comes back for like the final 2 minutes of the first quarter, and then plays at the start of the second quarter, comes out again, and then you play Jaylen Brown again for the final 6 minutes of the second quarter. That's actually a really interesting move to me as well. But I think that at the end of the day, the 76ers just got a guy that, for me, is probably around like the 15th best player in the league. Like right in that ballpark. 15th to 20th, somewhere in that range. That's around where I would have him. I don't think he's quite... Like, I know he finished, 6th in MVP voting. I think I had him like 8th or 9th this year, somewhere in that ballpark. So I wasn't quite as high as everyone else was, but he was well deserving of all of the accolades he got, second team All NBA, everything like that. I think it's a really, really good fit with the 76ers for Jaylen Brown because of the ability for Joel Embiid to be able to space the court, allowing him space to downhill drive. Certainly on the second side where he's able to get like stampede cuts off of Maxey Embiid ball screens. I think those are really going to be lethal as well. I think that there's just a lot of reason to be excited about the basketball fit of Jaylen Brown in Philadelphia in the same way that there was about Jaylen Brown's fit in Boston. Because one other thing that people would raise to me league-wide, right, about Jaylen Brown's value was he played in Boston in what people consider to be basically the best offensive scheme in the league, the most well-spaced offensive scheme in the league under Joe Mazzulla, where there's always oceans of space everywhere on the court because of the shooting that surrounded him and everything like that. He's still going to have that in Philadelphia, by and large. He still will largely have that in Philadelphia. And I think that's what's most exciting about a fit for him there, is that this should go really well. Defensively, he's a good on-ball defender, certainly. He is switchable in the way that you would want. I think this Philly team's going to be quite good. I think that between Maxey, they're still going to be entirely tied to whether or not Joel Embiid is healthy enough to make it through a playoff run, right? I don't think that a Maxey, Jaylen Brown, VJ Edgecombe trio is good enough to get you through the East. But I do think that if you have Embiid there, they can certainly make the finals. Like I have no doubt about that. I think that this does raise their ceiling in some way. And just so people know, like people ask me, or people are saying like, yeah, he was really good pre-Mazzulla. Of course he was really good pre-Mazzulla. the leap occurred right around the time that Joe Mazzulla got there, either as an assistant coach or as a head coach. And they started to really fire from three, and he got oceans of space to be able to attack. There's just kind of, if you look at his numbers, if you look at anything, that's when the leap came, is when they really started to space the court, and he was able to downhill drive and attack in the way that he was.
Well, he's a downhill driver and attacker. And so whether it's Mazzulla's 5-out system or somebody else's 5-out system, if there's space on the court, that somebody that attacks in that way is going to be better and more productive. And that is why I ultimately got to where I did, the same as you, in terms of his fit with Joel Embiid. In my mind, I was trying to figure out, how do they play to get, what actions are going to be best with them playing together. But more of what I got to was Maxey and Embiid playing those strong side ball screen actions.
Yeah.
And then Jaylen Brown stampede attack or 45 cut or whatever, and having that space, or simply Embiid spacing, Sam, right? Like maybe you just have to ask Embiid to do a little bit more of, I don't mean just stand in the corner, but hey, space to the weak side corner. I think he's more above the break is where he likes to be, but just being able to do those.
He likes to be at the elbows. If he's not playing in like the primary action, he likes to be at the elbows. And obviously the Maxey and Embiid ball screen ends up being so often, all right, high ball screen, Embiid short roll to the elbow, to the free throw line, everything like that. Hit the pass. Joel knocks down a mid-range jumper. Things of that nature, right?
Can I ask you something?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Who do you think starts? What's the starting lineup?
I would imagine it's probably very similar to what they were expecting. It's going to be Maxey, Edgecombe, Jaylen, Dean Wade, and Embiid.
Oh yeah. So I was trying to add somebody else in there? Yeah, that was way too easy. What was I
to me? To me, the bigger thing here is, okay.
My bad. I was doing very bad math. That was a silly question. I apologize.
The bigger question to me is that Jaylen obviously liked to play a lot in a lot of ball screens with Boston as well, right? And then they would use him in the post a little bit as well. I think that the post stuff probably goes away a little bit with Joel there, if only because Joel likes to operate in that like mid-range extended area. And then I also think that the ball screen stuff with Joel is going to be interesting, right? Because again, Jaylen likes to play in that mid-range area a little bit. Joel likes to, kind of short roll into that elbow free throw line area. Is that going to end up being just like a little bit crowded? Maybe. But these are all synergy issues that'll get worked out throughout the year to me, right? These are not significant concerns. These are concerns that, okay, there just might be some push-pull early on in the year. It might be some push-pull throughout the year. They'll figure it out.
This is why the amount of games Joel Embiid plays is important, though. He needs to play a certain number of games, and then they are games that Jaylen Brown and Tyrese Maxey and VJ Edgecombe also are available for, so they can work through these things in game actions. We've mentioned multiple times that we think that the floor has been raised in the regular season without Joel Embiid, but you just don't walk into the playoffs and figure out the things we're talking about if that trio has only played, or even all four of them, because I think VJ, even though, his game doesn't have to be as intertwined into this, it's still important that he knows where his spots are, where his relocations, when to cut, when to space, those type of things. Those four guys particularly need to have, I don't know what the number of games or the minutes played together or whatever, but I do think it's important that you get enough of a sample of that for them to work through all of these things so it is ready for the playoffs.
I think this is a really good point as well. I think this is a really, really good point. Finally, I see people will say like, oh, well, Jaylen Brown led them. He averaged 29, 7, and 5 this year. He was second team All NBA, everything like that. I think that he is much better in the role that we're discussing than he is in that number one primary action role. And the reason for that is kind of what we saw in the final 3 games of the Philadelphia series, right? Whenever a team has a genuine rim protector there like Joel Embiid, because Jaylen has improved as a passer and ball handler and things like that, but is still not on the level of the best of these players around the league, right? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo even, I think, is a little bit better of a passer and is just more physically dominant at the end of the day. Jaylen Brunson is an example of this, to be honest, in terms of his ability to get to his spots, make the right read more than anything. Because Jaylen can sometimes get cloudy with his vision. I think that teams that can condense the paint against him and have a real ball handler can make it a little bit more challenging and make it so that he can be slightly less efficient as a scorer. And this is comparing him again to literally the best players in the league.
Yeah.
Right? This is not saying that he can't do any of these things. This is saying, hey, the standard when you get to the top 5 and you start talking about Stephen Curry, you start talking about everybody in that ballpark, the standard's a little bit different at that level. I think Jaylen's a better athlete than a lot of those guys and has certainly improved his craft as a ball handler, his patience, his poise, his ability to draw defenders and use his patience to be able to then accelerate and be able to get to the rim or be able to get to a step back jumper in the mid range, everything like that, right? Certainly is able to draw fouls. He's a very, very capable player, but he gets slightly less efficient whenever you're able to really scheme game by game for him in the playoffs when you actually have like a rim protector in there, which Philly had in the final 3 games of that series. And ultimately, I actually think a big reason why that Boston lost that series was that Jaylen had to be the primary guy and couldn't consistently make the right reads and see the right areas of the court as a passer. And yet, I still think this is the right deal for Philly. I think this is a great deal for the 76ers. And I think because they have that primary Maxey Embiid action already in place, this is a great situation for Jaylen Brown to be entering to continue to be one of the 15-ish best players in the league, one of the 15 to 20 best players in the league. So I'm really excited about this. I think this is a great deal for Philly. On the Boston side, it feels like this is just done. Like it felt like it was done with Jaylen Brown at a certain point. And I'm really interested to see where they go from here, how they utilize these picks, how they utilize the assets they have now acquired. I think it's worth noting what Paul George is at this point too. He's a significant downgrade from Jaylen Brown at this point in his career. He averaged 17 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists per game last year. He is an exceedingly perimeter-oriented player, which is interesting because Brad Stevens, one of the things that I have seen him talk about is that they wanted to be able to get more rim pressure consistently this year. And that's just not going to happen, moving from Jaylen Brown to Paul George. Having said that, I think Paul George is a really good fit in Joe Mazzulla's scheme. Everything now for Boston comes down to Jason Tatum being able to reclaim that status as a top 5 player. By the way, to me, the difference between Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown is that ability to make passing reads, that ability to consistently see out and not just see kind of in toward the rim, dump offs, things like that. That's what makes Jason a really special player, is that he's not just an elite level pull-up 3-point shooter. He's not just a guy who's really developed his post game. He can make passing reads as well. So I think that Paul George should actually be a really good fit within this scheme. It wouldn't stun me if we see Paul George get back to averaging 20 points a game, to be honest with you. The issue here is just that Paul George tends to miss a lot of games. Over the course of the last 7 years, 48 games played, 54 games played, 31, 56, 74 in 2023-24, contract year. Then 41 and 37, obviously had the weird suspension this year that knocked him out. But even without that suspension, he was set to miss 20 games. If he can stay healthy, this is good for Boston. Or it's acceptable for Boston, I guess is the better way to put it. If he can't stay healthy, I think Boston really takes a step backward this year.
Can I start positive here with a question? Is Boston worse right now than they were this time 12 months ago? Heading into the season ahead for them.
I mean, heading into the season ahead, they had Jason Tatum out.
No, they didn't. Yeah, that's my point here. My point is they just got the number 2 seed in the East last year. I understand, but without Jason Tatum. So if you look at this team compared to what they had 12 months ago, it's Jason Tatum in the Jaylen Brown role. You add Paul George. They have Mitchel Robinson at center. My only point here is...
Yeah, you've 48 minutes now of Nimi Keita and Mitchell Robinson. That's actually pretty interesting. Yeah.
I'm not saying the ceiling is higher because I think that there's just no way I can make that argument whatsoever. Like, I just think it would be ridiculous for me to even try to. All I'm saying is I still think that you have a quality, at least regular season basketball team here. And then I haven't dove into it enough to know, but there's some draft picks available. There's, if you could, contracts, whatever. They have to go upgrade the roster at some point. You're not winning a championship with this roster. I want to be very clear. But it's not like they just took this massive step backwards where they have no chance to be competitive night in and night out or something like that. Assuming Jason Tatum comes back and is healthy. And you get even 55 or 60 games of Paul George. And Mitchell Robinson is able to play. We know he's going to miss games. I think my thing is, what now is the path back to actually being title contenders? What is the move now that you're going to make at the deadline or whenever it needs to be to actually be in a place to compete for a title? Because I'm not sure that this roster has that. I would still rather have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and I want to be clear here, but it's not like this roster is void of talent whatsoever or void of an ability to win basketball games here in the regular season. And then again, you have Jason Tatum going into the playoffs. If you were fully healthy, maybe you can make some moves and this gets really interesting really quick yet again.
Yeah. I'd be interested to know what their win total over unders is going to be, or what it will be. Because I think that I agree with you that I'd probably take over in the regular season as long as Tatum is thought to be 100% and is rolling, right? If he's not, that becomes a real issue for them and they're in like some real trouble.
Agreed.
But if he is, they're in a really, like they're going to win games in the regular season. Part of this is that you and I really think Joe Mazzulla, especially in the regular season. Now in the playoffs, there have been moments where his inflexibility scheme-wise can sometimes cause Boston problems, right? But in terms of regular season basketball, where you just don't have time to consistently game by game by game scheme and do everything that you need to, his system is going to allow them to win 45 games, like for sure, to me. When you have Jason Tatum and Paul George and Derek White and Peyton Pritchard and the center rotation of Nimi Keita and Mitchell Robinson, right? They might win 50 again. I think that's actually really plausible here. Mitchell Robinson's really good. Like, we haven't talked about that yet, and we will here in a minute. But Mitchell Robinson going to Boston does change the calculus for them in a big way, because their center rotation by the end of the year behind Keita was a real problem.
Well, and I think... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mentioned it, but Paul George could be really, really good in this system with the player that he is now. I just think he is a very, very good three-point shooter. He doesn't have some of the other aspects of his game. To your point, the rim pressure thing is like that is a major downgrade right now, losing Jaylen Brown, replacing those minutes with Paul George. But if you do get relatively decent help from Paul George, the floor spacing is real. He can do a little bit in isolation still whenever you would need him to. You mentioned the defense. So I just think that he could fit very well in this system. I just wonder if you can get to the deadline, and then if there's a move to be made then at the deadline And there may not be, because it's not like you're going to be able to move the Paul George deal into 2 players. We've talked about that. I don't know what the deal would be. I don't know. But I do know that I think they're going to be better in the regular season than maybe what people think right now. And I know that's not the expectation for Boston Celtics fans. I understand that completely.
Totally.
Fully understand that this lowered the ceiling and it lowered the chances of winning the NBA championship next year. All I'm saying is there's still a talented roster that I think is going to win a lot of regular season games. And maybe there's going to be a move that shows up at the deadline that puts them right back into that tier of teams that we're considering title contenders.
Yeah. Like, here's the thing. Jason Tatum played 16 games, like 9 months removed from an Achilles injury, and still averaged 21, 10, and 5.
Jason Tatum is very good at basketball.
Jason Tatum is insane. Like, I'm just saying, if Jaylen Brown tore his Achilles, it would be a real problem. Now, luckily enough, Jaylen Brown has not torn his Achilles, and I'm really happy for him that that's the case. But Jason Tatum being like closer to 15 to 16 months removed from an Achilles injury is going to be totally different than what it was 9 months removed, right? So to me, I think that they're probably going to win close to 50 games again. I agree with you entirely that their ceiling in the playoffs is much lower now without Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, which for me makes this a really difficult grade or a difficult trade to grade, right?
Agreed. Yep.
They are much, much worse in the playoffs without Jaylen Brown. But I think that there is a chance that if they can move these picks for something else useful, that they could have taken a small step back or maybe like a somewhat significant step back, then added Mitchel Robinson and then move these picks for something else to take a big step forward. I think there is that chance that exists. Right now, it's harder for me to think that the Celtics are better off now than they were before, I think is where I'm at.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's what makes this a little bit difficult for me. I'm open to that possibility. I'm open to, again, the Celtics are going to be good in the regular season. Like this is going to be an awesome regular season team again. But I do think that the playoffs became more of an uphill battle for them right now. Because they are, I mean, if people thought that they were perimeter oriented before in the playoffs and that they got super frustrated with Missoula, like just continuing to live by the 3, die by the 3, replacing Jaylen Brown with Paul George is going to make that even more of an issue. And we'll see if this is a complete deal or not. Right. In terms of like other trades league wide, I know that that's a conversation people want to have. Jaylen Brown going for 2 first-round picks versus what Giannis went for. I'm just telling you guys, Giannis is a drastically more valued player league-wide than what Jaylen Brown is. And you can agree with that or disagree with it. I'm just telling you that for front office people, that's just the reality of the situation. Walker Kessler getting more draft capital than what Jaylen Brown did. Now, that's a different conversation entirely, and we will talk about what the Lakers have done today. That was insane. But again, I think it speaks to the contract. Like Jaylen Brown makes twice as much as what Walker Kessler is going to make this year. And I think Jaylen Brown is
Kawhi return, right? Isn't that the most comparable trade we've seen?
It is. I would say that Kawhi probably, I think that those picks that the I think the picks that the Celtics got are better than the picks that than the Raptors got. Or than the Raptors gave up, rather. The Clippers gave up. I would rather have the Clippers 2028 pick and Philly's 2031 pick than unprotected picks from Toronto in 2031 and 2033. So I actually do think Boston got more for Jaylen Brown than the Clippers did for Kawhi Leonard. I think that's a really important thing. But yeah, I think that this is it's a very complicated deal to try to evaluate in the context of this market, which is really interesting. Should we talk a little bit more about Mitchell Robinson here before we move on from the Celtics? Mitchell Robinson, 3 for 47. Did you see if there are any protections on this? I don't know.
I usually wait until after everything goes through. I know there's been a lot of non-guarantees and mutual options and stuff through a lot of these deals that I'm going to have to go back and catch up on, but I haven't paid as close attention to that as probably what I should be during this phase of the offseason.
Yeah, so Mitchell Robinson got the full mid-level.
Player option for the third year.
With a player option for the third year.
I believe.
Okay. I think that's a contract that is entirely worthwhile for what it's worth. I think that is a deal that makes total sense for everybody involved. Mitchell Robinson and Nikola become one of the better low cost, 48 minutes of the center position. Like these two guys next year are going to combine to make under $20 million. Might be at $16 or $17 million next year. Maybe $17.5 million next year off the top of my head.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
That's probably going to be one of the 10 most valuable center roles in the NBA. If you look around the league, I would be surprised if the Celtics are not in the top 10 of the amount of value they derive from the center position over 48 minutes of a basketball game next season. Because both of those guys are really excellent players. When Mitchell Robinson's on the court, he is one of the 15 best centers in the NBA. Nikola last year was probably one of the 15 to 20 best centers in the NBA last year. And you're telling me you get 48 minutes of that? That's really valuable to me. I think that they're in a really positive position now moving forward there. That's an upgrade on their backup center position in a significant way. And he is exactly kind of the way that they play as well, because if you look at what Boston has valued, they value killing the possession game and killing the glass. This is a team that is 6th in offensive rebounding last year, 4th in defensive rebounding. And they did that with Nikola Vucevic playing 16 games, 21 minutes a night. They did it with Luka Garza playing 70 games and 16 minutes a night. Chris Boucher played some games early last year. Xavier Tillman played some games early last year. Amari Williams played 120 minutes last year. They kind of made a makeshift rotation work at the center position. And now you have Mitchell Robinson coming in for 20 to 25 minutes a night, and he's going to absolutely handle business in those second units and dominate the offensive glass. I would expect the Boston Celtics to be a top 3 offensive rebounding team next year.
If they can get 20 minutes a night from him and they can get 60 games from him and then into the playoffs healthy, this is going to be a really, really good deal. I want to be fair that there's a world where that doesn't happen. There is a world where he isn't available for 60 games. But if they can, I think with Kada, you still have Luka Garza to play minutes here and there. They can probably afford to only play him 60 games, 20 minutes a night. And then I think he will have to play more in the playoffs than what his role was for the Knicks, right? For the Knicks, he only played 14 minutes a night. I think he played all but one game in that playoff run. But for Boston, I actually think his minutes will have to increase into the playoffs, not decrease like it did with the Knicks. So that will be interesting. But I agree with you. This is going to be one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the NBA. And if he can give them that many minutes, so he played a total of, 1,100 minutes this year. If he can give them 1,200 minutes in the regular season, be healthy for the playoffs, that, to your point, especially for the price, for the cost, that is going to be about as good a value as you can get in terms of 48 minutes at the center position for what they need from the center position, and guys that really go attack the offensive boards, can protect the rim. And he gives you that lob threat whenever you do want to run some ball screen actions and all of that. I liked this for the Celtics.
Yeah. And again, I really can't, to finish on the Celtics here before we move to the Lakers, I really can't emphasize enough how valuable, in my opinion, those picks are going to be. I would much rather have those picks than the Toronto picks that the Clippers got in the Kawhi deal, because the 2028 one is like most favorable of multiple teams, essentially, where they get the number one overall pick if any of them, Philly or LA, get the number one overall pick, right? So given how wild the lottery is set to be moving forward for the next 3 years, I think that pick is actually quite valuable. And I think the 2031 Philly pick is more valuable than a 2031 Raptors pick. I just do, because of how old those guys are compared to how old the Toronto roster is compared to the Philly roster. So not a deal I would have made if I was Boston. I would have tried to bring Jaylen Brown back and everything, but I at least can craft the reasoning behind why they did this, at least.
Sure.
Okay. Let's talk about the Lakers, Bryce. The LA Lakers, we're just going to roll through what they have done. They have signed Walker Kessler to a 4-year, $130 million deal in a sign-in trade. In that sign-in trade, they gave away unprotected first-round picks in 2031 and 2033, as well as 2 pick swaps in 2029 and 2030. Oh, my brain's broken. They've signed Sandro Mamukelashvili to a 4-year, $52 million deal? $53 million deal. They have signed Quentin Grimes to a 4-year, $60 million deal. And they have signed Colin Sexton to a 2-year, $19 million deal. What is your immediate reaction to everything the Lakers have done today, Bryce?
And I'm just going off Spot Track with this. I trust Keith Smith very much, so I'm not going to research every single player, but it also looks like every one of those players got a player option as well, other than Colin Sexton. So a lot of player options on the LA Lakers cap sheet here on Spot Track.
For what it's worth, Shams has reported both Quentin Grimes and Sandro Mamukelashvili have a player option, as well as Kessler having a player option. So yes.
So I really tried to think about this, and I'll be, this isn't going to come off great. I tried to put out the value of the picks and the contracts and all of that, and just think about the roster to start. And what do I think about a roster that starts Luka Doncic, Austin Reeves, Quentin Grimes, Sandro Mamukelashvili, and Walker Kessler, and then brings Colin Sexton, Jake LaRavia, Jared Vanderbilt, DeAndre Ayton off the bench. And my thought was, okay, that's a decent start. I can live with that as somebody who has said this is going to take 2 years to completely answer all of the roster questions for the Lakers. So, not bad. The problem is, I don't think they got value on any of those contracts, including Mamukelashvili, who we love.
We both really like. Yeah.
Talked about multiple times, Sam, but every time we talked about him, we said 3 for 30, something like that, right? And so then it's, well, now how are they going to upgrade? This isn't a championship roster. Quentin Grimes as your 6th or 7th man, Sandro Mamukelashvili as your 6th or 7th man, Colin Sexton as your 4th guard. That's all really, really good. But that's not the roles those guys are going to play in. And then do they have the draft capital and just general resources to upgrade this moving forward at the deadline next year? Maybe they do end up having a path to that, but that's ultimately where I'm nervous now, is they've spent all of this. They spent all of that draft capital, and then this is kind of it. Who's your 3rd best player on this team? How are you going to go get that player? And so ultimately, I'm a little bit concerned now. They are better than they were 24 hours ago whenever we talked about this last night. I'm concerned how they truly build out a championship roster over the next 12 to 18 months now.
That's ultimately my worry as well. Let's talk about Walker Kessler first.
Okay.
I think Walker Kessler is a really good player. I feel way better about Walker Kessler at $32 million per year, where that contract is going to start at $30 million a year and then escalate up to 34 at some point on that player option, 35-ish on that player option. than I did when he was in theory going to get upwards of 38 to 40 million. I think Walker Kessler is a really good defensive player. I think Walker Kessler can be an all defense level guy in the NBA. I went back and watched a bunch of Kessler tape. I'm going to do a big like scouting Walker Kessler thing at The Athletic for tomorrow. What I think goes a little bit underrated about Walker Kessler is that he is a great drop coverage big. His backpedal and drop coverage is about as good as any big in the league, frankly. He is incredible at drop. He is so good at playing the angles. He's so good with his anticipation. He is awesome in drop coverage. The thing that I had forgotten a little bit because he missed all but 5 games this year was that Utah had started to really experiment with him playing more consistently in switch situations, playing at the level and recovering. And I thought he held up a little bit better in those situations than what I remembered personally. Whenever I was thinking back to 24, 25. Utah had really started to get a little bit creative, seeing what they had with him. And I thought that his mobility and movement ability held up just slightly better than what you expect when you see a guy listed at 7'1", 270 pounds, 260 pounds, whatever he is, and is known as the best shot blocker or one of the best shot blockers in the NBA. So I think that defensively, he is exactly what they needed at the end of the day. I just think he's really limited on offense, man. And he can pass from a standstill. He can make high-level reads to cutters and things like that. Utah had really started to experiment with that this year, using him as a hub in the way that they used Jusuf Nurkic throughout the year in these first 5 games. He had 3 games with 4 assists to start the year. I also think that he can't really dribble. He's a really effective finisher because of the shots that he takes. But he's above the rim. He's more above the rim than Donovan Clingan is, for instance, right? He has more lift than what Clingan does. But there are some of the same issues that I think could pop up in a playoff series with Walker Kessler as happened with Donovan Clingan in the Portland-San Antonio series, where Portland just really struggled to have Clingan on the court because he didn't really have a way to threaten the opposing team offensively outside of shooting. And Clingan's not a great shooter. He's gotten better as a shooter. He made 39% on 3.5 attempts per game late in the year or whatever, but teams still don't guard him, right? Kessler is not that level of shooter even. He has potential as a shooter. When he was coming up out of Georgia and when he was at North Carolina, people thought he was going to be a real spacing big. If he's going to be able to really play in the playoffs like Rudy Gobert has, for instance, I almost think that that's going to be a really important thing. Kessler's a great offensive rebounder as well. Does a great job crashing the glass. That could make him really valuable in the playoffs too, as compared to even Donovan Clingan. I think he's a better offensive rebounder than what Clingan is. He's more in the Mitchel Robinson vein of being an amazing offensive rebounder. He just really can't create a shot. And look, you look at the center list, right? We've talked a lot about what are the rankings of centers in terms of payment. We thought that there was a chance he was going to get more than what Alperen Şengün gets paid. And that ultimately ended up not happening, which is really, really good. He's now the 10th highest paid center in the league. Honestly, that feels pretty right to me in terms of what I think his upside can be. I think that he has a real chance to be an all defense big who averages 15 and 10 a game and block shots and can pass a little bit from the high post. He's also a great screen setter. That's another thing that's really underrated. He's a killer screen setter, which will be really valuable for Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves. But someone will ask in the comments, why does he need to create a shot when he has Luka and Austin Reeves? You're overthinking this. And that's just not the way it works in the playoffs, guys. Because teams will just play off of Walker Kessler and gum up the entire interior, much in the same way that you see with Portland, much in the same way as you see if you go back and you watch Utah series with Rudy Gobert early in his career, and frankly, early in his Minnesota career as well. teams will just play off of these bigs and then make them play in dump off situations or make them play in screens and play drop. They just try to cloud the vision as much as possible. And when you're trying to force difficult situations for the best players in the NBA, you're never going to stop them totally. But if you can make them 42% from the field and then contest their 3-point shots, that can be enough to win a playoff series at the end of the day. So I think it's really important to kind of call out what the issues are with Kessler too. The biggest issue is what Bryce said, though. They're now totally locked into this. They are 100% locked into Luka, Austin Reeves, Walker Kessler is their trio. And unless Cam Carr ends up being a real dude who's like a potential top 3 option in the league, it's going to be really hard for them to find a third option offensively. And that's why this deal for me does not really work for the Lakers. And I think they gave up way too much because they've given up all of their draft upside moving forward. And that's a significant problem when you're trying to create trades to then go out and get better. They have no pick capital now, literally, that they can move. If you look at what they have at their disposal, they have literally sent out, I think, every second round pick outside of their 2033 second round pick. On top of the fact that they now cannot move any first round pick and don't have any upside on the picks that they have because they've sent out swaps on, I believe, all of them now. I think they've sent out swaps on all of them. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Bryce, but maybe not 2032. I think they haven't sent out a swap on 2032 at this point. But yeah, it's going to be really hard to create a contender with this core.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard to create a contender with this core. And I'm fairly staggered that the new ownership group that's coming in allowed Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss and this ownership group that seemingly still has some control over the situation to mortgage this much of the future when they're going to be in charge in order to do this deal now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And to me, it's just a huge bet on Walker Kessler. I think that's why it's important to, I'm sure people are going to be upset that you were overly critical or too nitpicky or whatever you want to say with Walker Kessler's game. But I'm sorry, whenever you get the contract that pays you as a top 10 center in the NBA and the team sends out the draft capital the Lakers sent out to acquire you, then that's how we have to analyze him now on this roster. And that's not Walker Kessler's fault, but that's the situation he's in now. He is in a situation for the Los Angeles Lakers where he needs to not just be the third best player on the team, Sam, be the third best player on a team that's trying to compete for a championship. You are right in the prime of Luka Doncic's career, now Austin Reeves' career, who you've locked in long-term. Now is the time. And I want to be fair. I said I didn't think that they could do it in one offseason. My worry is they didn't leave any flexibility for it to go beyond this offseason.
Correct.
What is the play at the deadline to make it? Even if you told me, hey, they have DeAndre Ayton and Jared Vanderbilt's contracts, what are you attaching to those to go get another player next offseason? What is the play? I assume they could probably be in the non-tax MLE, so you're adding one player, but that is my concern. Now, if Walker Kessler improves and continues to, if he's the player you outlined at the top, if he is truly an all defense level player and he averages 15 to 17 and 10 to 12, I think that this has a chance to work then, because that level of defensive improvement for this team, that level of rim protection that he would provide, and then being able to work with Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves and ball screens, play finishing, all of that. I do think that if he is that guy, that does give him a chance. But he has to be that. If he's anything short of that, this just isn't going to work. And even if he is that, again, as much as I like Sandro Mamukelashvili, as much as I like Quentin Grimes in a specific role, as much as I like Colin Sexton, I think even maybe more than most in a specific role, those guys aren't your fourth and fifth starters. So there is more needs to be done to actually build out a championship roster, even if Walker Kessler lives up to the contract and the draft capital that you gave up for him. I'm just curious what the path is to get there over the next 12 to 18 months.
Let's finish out the Lakers moves here, and then we'll talk about Utah and what they're getting back here. So Sandro Mamukelashvili, guy that we really like, and I think is probably one of the best backup bigs in the NBA. I don't know that I love him as a starter personally, and people kind of compare him to Rui. Like I saw that kind of early on when this was reported, the idea of he's going to be the Rui replacement. They're very different players.
Yeah,
Like Sandro is a lot more of like a playmaking big who can dribble, pass, and shoot, and I think he can really pass. Is the really fun part of his game.
An all-around offensive skill set. No,
totally. And he will grab and go on the break and create offense early, and he can do a lot of really fun, creative things. I like that best against second units as opposed to in the starting lineup personally. And I like that as like a 5-out center option. I would not start Sandro if I was the Lakers. I would bring him in for Walker Kessler and then let him play with Austin Reeves a little bit, frankly, in the second unit, or Luka, if you want to do it that way. But I like Austin particularly because of Austin's ability to get downhill and get to the line and really be able to like kind of play out of pivots and things like that. And kind of let the Lakers' second unit be really impactful offensively at that point. Sandro, someone said, is Sandro like Nikola Mirotic light? I think that Nikola Mirotic is kind of an interesting comparison for him. Again, kind of different because I think Sandro is like a little bit more creative than what Mirotic was when Mirotic was with the Bulls, but like an interesting point of comparison is a guy that became an NBA like starter, probably was best as a sixth man. Quentin Grimes, I think, immediately starts, and Quentin Grimes is going to have to get back to defending, is the key. I thought that he went way, way too far toward like offensive on-ball creation with the Sixers, and I don't know if that was maybe because he felt like he was on the qualifying offer and needed to do this to get paid. Ultimately, it worked. He got $15 million a year. But I think that in this role particularly, where you now have Austin Reeves, Luka Doncic, Colin Sexton, he has to be able to guard. Otherwise, they should have just given Marcus Smart 4 years, $60 million.
Yeah.
And honestly, Bryce, I would have preferred them giving Marcus Smart 3 years, $45 million. I think Marcus Smart's just a better player than Quentin Grimes, if I'm being honest. I do. I think that Marcus Smart was a better defender last year. I thought Marcus Smart was really good defensively through the second half of the season. We know what he can be offensively. Maybe he just decided he wanted to leave. Maybe he decided that he wanted to go and be in Houston with Ime Udoka, who coached him to one of his best seasons of his career. I totally get that. But man, 2 years, $13 million versus 3 years, $45 million. Might have worked. I'm just saying, like, it might have worked, right? Losing Smart was not ideal for me. I would rather have Marcus Smart than Quentin Grimes. But Quentin Grimes is a good player. He will help. He's got to lock in on defense again. That's the big key for me. He just absolutely has to.
My thing with Grimes is always, can we get to the practical version of who I think he can be as a player? And that player is extremely valuable and could really, really work with this Lakers team. I feel like I've just been waiting for a few years to get to that player. And maybe in this role where as you mentioned, Luka, Austin, Colin Sexton are all handling the basketball, and he doesn't really have to do a whole lot of that other than in a secondary capacity on the weak side, the second side. But if he could be that defender in the starting lineup, that would be huge for this team. Like, that would be massively valuable if he can take all of those tough perimeter matchups.
Final one, Colin Sexton. You kind of sold me a little bit on this earlier, like before we started recording, that they just need a backup point guard. I would have preferred a backup point guard who I think is a little bit more effective defensively than what Colin Sexton is. Sexton is just it's very easy to take advantage of him off of the ball, even though he is aggressive on the ball.
So it's funny. We probably had our biggest disagreements over the last month before we recorded. I think people would have enjoyed that on the show. You came a little bit towards, and then I think I saw a little bit of yours. I actually went back and read my notes, Sam, as you were trying to figure out the Celtics draft pick stuff. And I do have to admit, my notes are littered with, I love the energy and effort on the ball. I'm not quite sure how effective and how good the defense always is. I will say I still don't mind him in general as another guard, another ball handler off the bench, and as someone that I do think that in this role off the bench can take some of these very specific point of attack matchups against second units. So I do still think I'm probably a little higher on this. I shouldn't say high. I'm more okay with this than maybe you are. I've talked to other people who didn't think it was a good deal either, that it was just too much money for Colin Sexton. I'm still perfectly fine with it. I understand people who question a little bit more, but I'm okay with this one.
Yeah, it's just, he's not a bad player. Like, I don't want to say that Colin Sexton is like not an effective basketball player, because he is. I don't know. Like, I think about, would I rather have him or somebody like Bruce Brown or something? Like, use like half of the room exception on Bruce Brown, half the room exception on somebody else, or something like that. Maybe
listen,
like Bruce Brown can guard the point of attack. Like, I'm like trying to think of different outcomes that I like more.
I would hear this out, because as I went through the roster and the second unit, Colin Sexton, Cam Carr, Jake LaRavia, Jared, adding another wing or somebody like, I think they could absolutely use another rotation player, I guess is my point. Yeah. So if you could take it wasn't quite $10 million, $9.4 million or whatever the first year number is going to be. If you can take that and split it into two different players, I would absolutely hear that out. I'm probably just more comfortable with, hey, Colin Sexton is a third guard that can go and score the basketball, can handle the basketball a little bit, can defend at the point of attack a little bit. I think I'm a little bit more sold on his ability to do that. But I also understand the idea of splitting that up into two $4.5 million, $5 million players to help with your overall rotation depth.
Yeah. Any other thoughts here on the Lakers before we move to the Jazz real quick?
I do not think so.
Okay, let's talk about the Jazz. They get 2 firsts. They're unprotected, and 2 pick swaps for Walker Kessler. From a Lakers team that does not have Luka Doncic signed beyond the next 2 years. This is about as good as you can do it, asset-wise. And I am somewhat staggered that the Lakers decided to do this. Just purely from an asset perspective.
You know what's funny is you asked me last night if I would essentially take this deal for Jalen Duren. If I hesitated. And I went back to that moment when this trade came through today, because you know what my immediate reaction was, Sam? Wow, what a return for the Utah Jazz. And so then it took me back to last night going, man, was I crazy for even hesitating? And we don't need to rehash that, because ultimately that's not what happened.
Well, yeah. And what I said last night too was like, if the price tag was 35 for Walker Kessler, and it ended up being slightly less than that, it ended up being 32 even, versus 45 for Jalen Duren, which I'm assuming is what someone would have to pay to pry him out of Detroit, then I would have preferred to go with Kessler. But if it was more like 38-39 versus 45,
you would take
Kessler
Duren
versus Duren, I would have taken Duren for sure.
Yeah.
And I think Duren has a better chance to live up to a $45 million contract than Kessler would have a $39 million contract. But I think that once you get into like the 32 range, like Kessler is at, I think he has a pretty reasonable chance to live up to this deal. It's just that he doesn't really have a chance, I think, to live up to the deal of 32 million plus 2 picks plus 2 swaps.
So the point there was, I think this is a really good return for the Utah Jazz is what I was trying to get to. And with that said, I now find myself a little bit lower on what they are going to be this season. This is a team we were very excited about. This is a team we are talking about being playoff bound in the upcoming season. And this is a team now that's going to rely, as of July 1st, on Jusuf Nurkic, who you and I both thought was really good for them last year, and Jackson Hayes, and maybe some Kyle Filipowski. And I know people are going to scream Jaren Jackson Jr. at me, and I know Jaren Jackson Jr. can play time at the 5. I don't think he's the answer at the 5. And so while it's understandable that they took that deal more than, I do find myself a touch less excited about this team, at least in regards to where I'm at for the 26-27 season.
Yeah, I would generally agree with being lower, but I think that it's going to be easier for them to find a big that they need. Even using one of these picks, let alone the second pick in the swap, than it would have been if they had re-signed Kessler at $35 million a year or whatever, 32, 33, whatever.
Yeah.
So I am not. I think this is a good deal for Utah, is where I'm at. And by the way, Utah is back to having a surplus of draft picks again. Like a significant surplus of draft picks again. This is why you and I remain just so incredibly high on this Utah team moving forward and like the Jazz situation moving forward. They have all of Darren Peterson, Ace Bailey on top of Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Keontae George and Bryce Sensabaugh, Isaiah Collier, Kyle Filipowski, and still have a surplus of draft picks moving forward. That's a pretty massive deal to me. They're gonna be in a really positive position here. And on top of it, now that they didn't pay Kessler $30 million, and they can maybe go find a center for $15 to $20 million on the market, which I think they'll be able to find, frankly. They're now able to be a lot more flexible and able to pay the guys that they're gonna have to pay down the road, which is coming.
I mean, maybe the pivot now is you do look at that center position as we're going to get 25% of those minutes from Jaren Jackson Jr. Nurkic can play another whatever percent. We can get a little bit from Jackson Hayes, a little bit from Filipowski. Maybe you don't even have to go get a $20 million player. Maybe you just get another one for $10 to $15 million that provides something that none of those guys provide. You know what I mean? Like, I just wonder now if they can pivot to that. And then to your point, now you're okay paying Keontae George his extension and not have to worry about eventually having to decide between him and Ace Bailey, a few years down the road. So I'm interested to see what the move is now for them. I think it could end up being fine. And ultimately, I think it was the right decision and they're going to figure it out. I just was very excited about the idea of watching what I thought this team was going to be in terms of Keontae George, Darren Peterson, Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., Walker Kessler, and then those guys off the bench. We're just not going to get to see it now.
Jackson Hayes also has signed with the Utah Jazz, 2 years, $12 million. I would bet you that they did this the way that they did this. just in case they end up being a tax team would be my read, because this does fit into a non-taxpayer mid-level exception. Now, like, they do have a significant amount of space away from the tax, even still. Like with the Nurkic deal and with Hayes coming in and with Darren Peterson entering the fold as well, like they're still way, way under. I'm trying to figure out why they structured this way, because I guess the tax isn't really a threat for this year for them.
I also believe it's a team option on year 2 for Jaxson Hayes. I don't know if you said that or not. Sorry, but
I didn't, but that would make sense. Because I think this is probably an overpay for Jaxson Hayes, frankly, at like $6 million. I'm not a huge Jaxson Hayes fan. He's like a solid backup big, but if you're expecting him to come in and start, that's not going to happen. That's going to be Yusuf Nurkic. Yep. And I'm interested to watch them still. We talked a lot about liking the Nurkic deal quite a bit.
Yep.
It's incredibly important that they got that done now. And Nurkic was really good last year. Again, one of the most underrated bigs in the NBA, Yusuf Nurkic, a season ago. Was really impactful on the glass. Awesome as like a hub playmaker. I think that the way that Will Hardy's scheme runs is going to be spectacular again for Nurkic, adding in Darren Peterson as well, where Darren Peterson's going to be able to make shots and make plays. I think the Jazz have done a really good job. I don't know that I would have them as a playoff team now that I know that they're losing Kessler. I think I would have them more as like maybe the 7 seed in the West now moving forward for this year. But I do think that this is still going to be an awesome basketball team that wins at least 45 games, I would say.
Yeah. I'm not sure that the offense is much of a concern for me based off what we saw from Nurkic. It's really just the defensive end where Kessler was going to make such an impact. They still have Jaren Jackson Jr. there. We'll see what kind of growth they get from Ace Bailey on the defensive end. We'll see what Darren Peterson can be as a rookie. We'll see if Keontae George can take another step forward defensively. That's a huge part of his growth as well. But that's where Walker Kessler really tied it all together by being that defensive anchor that Nurkic just simply isn't, Jaxson Hayes isn't, Kyle Filipowski isn't.
Okay. Let's dig into all of these other moves that we still have to discuss, Bryce. My goodness. Okay. First, Norman Powell to the Chicago Bulls. 2 years, $45 million. Jake Fisher is reporting there's a team option in year 2 on that deal. Interesting move from the Chicago Bulls. This comes after last night. They signed Zach Collins to a 2-year, $17 million contract extension, which I think took some people by surprise, because the way that an extension works is that instead of being able to slot that into the room exception, they then had to use cap space to be able to do that, or eat into their cap space to be able to do that extension. The reason that I understand on why that happened is that's something that Zach Collins' agency really pushed for, because they wanted Collins to maintain his bird rights moving forward. Whereas if you decline that player option, or you take him into free agency and make him the room exception player, it ends up being a situation where he loses his bird rights as soon as he hits free agency and then is brought back under the room exception. So that's why that happened that way. I am a little bit stunned, to be honest, if I would be a Bulls fan right now. I'm a little bit stunned that the Bulls have done Nick Claxton into their space, have done Norman Powell into their space, and have done Zach Collins into their space without getting back any future-facing assets. That to me, and look, when we did the Bulls preview, people yelled at us because they were like, oh, Bryson Graham, he's talking up the big game. He's saying the right things. He's going to go and get contracts that are poor and get future-facing assets, and it's going to work really well for them. Sure, like that, the Bulls have just never done that before. Maybe Bryson Graham wanted to do that, but they didn't end up doing it. Like, I'm never going to believe in this Bulls ownership group until we see them actually make smart decisions that help them build their asset cash moving forward, which actually helps them. Like, everything they've done here is just for the next 2 years. And you look at what Utah did, giving up Walker Kessler, they've received assets back, right?
Yeah.
I just don't understand, if you're the Bulls, how you can have all this cap space and literally none of the moves that you have made so far involve you getting back future facing assets that are of like real significant value.
They kind of have to trade Jalen Smith now, right? They have to take our advice and trade Jalen Smith for...
No, Bryce, I don't think they can, because it's really valuable for them to have a shooter at the center position next to Caleb Wilson. So, like, I don't if they had taken Henri Vesar at 38 instead of selling the pick, I'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. That's fine. At least they have somebody that can be an option, even though Vesar's probably not ready to play in the NBA yet. I actually don't think they can move Jalen Smith yet, because you need an option there to help Caleb Wilson develop.
Maybe they can move Nick Claxton then? I don't know. Listen, I agree with you overall. It's a great point that they weren't able to use cap space to actually acquire future draft assets, at least up to this point. We'll see if they're able to do that moving forward. I will say this. This is probably my biggest takeaway. In a vacuum, I'm kind of okay with the Norm Powell deal. One, there is a team option on year 2, as you mentioned. Having a scorer like Norm Powell on this team does make sense for me. One, to keep games competitive, and 2, not to force Caleb Wilson, Modest Buzelis, etc., into roles that they may not be ready for just yet. Again, in a vacuum, I understand that because they only went this route of acquiring players, Nick Claxton, Zach Collins, Norm Powell, that overall it doesn't necessarily look like they played this the right way. But ultimately, I do like the Norm Powell acquisition, just because I do think it puts a rebuilding team, it gives a rebuilding team a real 3-level score to keep their young players in roles that they should be in. But I get your point, Sam, about not being able to capitalize on the cap space and build out assets.
None of this is a statement on Norman Powell, who I think is like 100% worth this pick and will be an amazing trade chip at the deadline if that's how they decide to use it.
Sure.
Or will really help guys like Josh Giddey, and Modest Buzelis and Caleb Wilson and everything like that. Like, I'm not in any way opposed to Norman Powell. Like, Norman Powell deserves this money. Norman Powell is a guy that fits with what they need. He is like, all that's true. But this seems like not a playoff team next year, Bryce.
Agreed.
Like, why are we buying now to essentially be like the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference versus trying to build out our asset cash for when Caleb Wilson is 25 and Josh Giddey is 28 or 29 and Modest Buzelis is 27, and we might actually have a chance then? It's just that doesn't track for me.
They went all in on one side of it is the issue here. Is if you do just one of these, to me, the Norm Powell one, and don't do the other two, and the other two moves would have been bringing in quote unquote bad contracts for future assets, I would have liked this offseason. I think it would have been a really good offseason. But
if they had done Norman Powell and not Nick Claxton,
correct.
Cool, great. I'm for it.
Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe the Nuggets just aren't willing to deal Cam Johnson or Christian Brown and give up like pick swaps or something. Like maybe there are just teams out there that are not as worried about the tax for whatever reason. I don't know, but I'm definitely struggling with this one with the Bulls, just in terms of their overall plan for the offseason. Speaking of overall plan for the offseason, Bryce, let's talk about the Detroit Pistons. They have signed John Collins to a 3-year, $51 million contract. And not really done anything else. They've lost Tobias Harris, who's signed with San Antonio Spurs. We'll talk about that momentarily. What's going on here?
So you want me to be honest?
Yeah.
This is the offseason I thought they were going to have, Sam. Over on the Pistons Pulse, I eventually got to where they were going to bring back Jalen Duren, which I think still happens. They were going to extend to Sar Thompson. They were going to make, well, that's not true. I didn't think they were going to trade Isaiah Stewart. But I didn't think they were going to end up making a big move, I guess. They added a little bit of not a little bit. They added some floor spacing in Isaiah Joe. Sounds like they're going to keep Duncan Robinson. And then they would tell you they made an upgrade at the 4. I would agree with them. I think at this point, John Collins is better than Tobias Harris, but I don't think it's a massive upgrade where it's like, oh, this is just a home run addition.
I have always been like a big John Collins guy. I actually don't agree with you that this is an upgrade.
Interesting.
And the reason is more around what is surrounding Cade Cunningham right now. I think there's a chance where it could be an upgrade when we look at the totality of their offseason by the end of it.
Sure.
Like if they were to go out and pay for like Anthony Simons or something now if they structure John Collins as a sign and trade and then go pay for Anthony Simons, I can like see a little bit more. If they would have done Norman Powell, like I would have understood it a little bit more, I guess too. But
you think they're really going to miss the Tobias Harris offensive creation ability that John Collins does not. Fair point. Listen, for a team where people said they don't have enough ball handling, they haven't added a whole lot of ball handling. They've added floor spacing.
They've lost ball handling. Forget added. They've lost it. I know they drafted Okori, but like, do we think Okori's going to be ready to go next year?
I don't know. You're right. It's fair. I will mention, John Collins, 2 non-guaranteed years on the deal.
Yeah.
And then it does sound like, I don't know this for fact, but it does very much sound like it's going to be a sign and trade. However it all plays out, I do not know that, but it does sound like it's going to end up being a sign and trade of all of the Isaiah Stewart trade to Memphis and Isaiah Joe trade, like all of that stuff is still a little bit up in the air on how it's actually going to go down. Yeah,
so like Yossi Gozlan, who does an amazing job with cap stuff as well, was the first person to mention this, but I did think of this as well. Basically, all of these like Isaiah Stewart deals, Isaiah Joe, John Collins, Santi Aldama, like all these deals are right around the same number. And you could very easily structure this as like a crazy 5-team sign and trade, or as like a 3-team sign and trade using some of these names, as a 4-team sign. Like you could do a whole lot of different things with all of these players if the Pistons really wanted to structure it that way. I need to see what the other shoe is here for the Pistons before like going nuclear on it, I guess. And like John Collins in theory can play some of the 5, like as a small ball 5, which I'm sure was part of their calculus as well, to like have another option after trading Isaiah Stewart, get another option at the small ball 5 where you have a rim runner who would work really well with Cade Cunningham in that respect, obviously, can pick and pop, gives you some role flexibility and everything. I think that what Tobias brought as a bailout shot creator in like the mid post is more valuable under the Pistons' current roster construction, maybe not by the end of it, than what John Collins will bring them. But I am willing to be patient and see where this goes.
I think it's a very fair point, and there's no question that Harris has more of that in his game than John Collins does. I will also say this.
Who is the second shot creator on the perimeter right now for the Pistons?
Danis Jenkins.
I think that's probably true, and we love Danis Jenkins. He's not ready for that, I don't think.
I think Danis Jenkins should be the starting guard next to Cade Cunningham as things sit right now.
As things sit right now, I would agree with that. Right?
I mean, it could be Duncan Robinson. They could just start Duncan Robinson again. But my argument right now is Danis Jenkins provides the best combination of some on-ball ability, enough off-ball ability, and defense compared to Isaiah Joe, Duncan Robinson, Abuka, Corey, etc.
I think that Duncan and Isaiah are a little bit too duplicative in bench units together. So I probably would start Duncan.
I'll hear that out.
But
my argument was you played Danis 4.5, 5 minutes. There's also a little bit of nuance to this where I felt like Danis just played better when he started than when he came off the bench. And so, but you can get into those nuance. That minutia can be later, right? I also wonder if the Jalen Duren stuff, while it seems like Trajan has played this correctly because the Lakers are now out of play here and everybody but Sacramento is out of play. The Celtics are out of play and everybody but Sacramento, which was still going to have to be a sign and trade. I do wonder if that has hung up any sort of other move that Trajan Langdon would want to make. My point has been, you have to know what that number is actually going to be for Jalen Duren because that delta is so wide based on the numbers we've talked about here. I would want to know that before I made one of these other big, quote unquote, big moves or big additions. And so I do wonder if he's slowed some of this down because he's played it the way he's played it. And again, I fully understand why he's played it the way he has.
The other piece of this in that respect is that all of the teams that have cap space, I think, are done outside of Brooklyn, right?
And there might be a path still for them to get more, but I feel like the last number I saw was 30 million, which just isn't enough to put pressure on Jalen Duren's not signing that offer sheet. I'm sure they could get to a bigger number if they really, really wanted to.
I wonder if if this doesn't get done by the 7th, I would say, which is when the moratorium ends, I wonder if we're kind of hunkering down for a long Jalen Duren restricted free agency negotiation.
I can't do that.
I mean, so if they're saying that they're not doing a sign and trade, which is what all of the messaging coming out of Detroit is, right? Is that they're not doing a sign and trade, that they want to keep Jalen Duren. And he doesn't really have leverage beyond a sign and trade. I feel like it's just going to be the next pressure point then is really like training camp starting.
I just need this to get done so we can talk about the number. And go. I don't enjoy talking about this anymore.
It sucks. I agree with you. It really sucks. But I just wonder if it doesn't get done by the 7th, which I think it could. Like, you never know, right? I just wonder. I wonder if that's where we're headed because there just won't be like a pressure point. Detroit won't feel a need to change its offer. Duren will be like, no, I want this much money. And then they go to camp and Duren's not there. Like maybe that changes the pressure points, right? When the Pistons are looking at, hey, our center rotation is Paul Reed and John Collins. Like that could change things a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know where Jalen gets the leverage that he needs now, actually.
just for anybody who missed last night, can we just quickly mention again that neither of us think that he can play this out and play on the qualifying offer, considering the amount of money that's on considering the amount of money that I believe is most likely on the table from the Pistons. His qualifying offer is down around $9 million. That's just to me, that would be just a crazy, crazy bet to play on that. Assuming Detroit is offering what I think they're offering, which is somewhere in the $30+ million a year.
Even if they're offering $150 or something,
yeah,
you're turning down $150 million. And here's the other thing too. So if there's and I think that's a low end of what they could be offering for what it's worth.
Agreed.
Even if Duren came back to them and was like, hey, can we do a shorter term deal, right? Can we do a 2+1 at 35 a year or something like that? If I'm the Pistons, I think at this point, I'm kind of like, no,
yeah.
We're going to stick to, we'll give you a 4+1, but we're going to stick to like a big year or a big long-term deal. Because again, there's just like there's no leverage anywhere right now. So again, that's why I wonder if we end up in like a longer stalemate here with him. And Peyton Watson's the other one now. I wonder if so Brooklyn has like 30 million. Brooklyn in theory, I think could do something like this, right? It's a player that I could see them liking, positional size, dribble pass shoot skills, everything like that. And if I was Peyton Watson's people, I would be pretty strongly posturing that they have an offer from Brooklyn. But again, I wonder if we're hunkering down for a longer deal there.
We still have 4 players, just like last offseason. I don't know how long all 4 will continue, but we still have 4 restricted free agents: Jalen Duren, Peyton Watson, Tari Eason, and Benedict Mathurin, that we're going to see how these things play out. And I don't know if it'll stretch out as long as last year's did with those 4 players, but it kind of hit me today that money is starting to be spent. Cap space for some teams is starting to really go away, as we've talked about. And with that cap space going away, obviously their ability to really pressure the teams they're currently with goes away with that cap space.
Yep. Okay, next up, Tobias Harris. Let's just go from Detroit to where Tobias is going, to San Antonio. 2-year mid-level exception deal. Any options on this or fully guaranteed?
Let me look it up while you talk about the fit. Fully guaranteed, no options on the second year.
Makes sense. So Tobias, really good fit for them and kind of exactly what they should want at the 4 position. Either they continue to start the guys that they started, or they bring Julian Champagnie off the bench now. I think I would probably start Tobias Harris over Julian Champagnie personally, because I think it's a little bit better of a fit from a rebounding perspective, from just like a size perspective. I think he gives them like a little bit more of like a mismatch ability. And Tobias is going from being the number 2 option on the perimeter to like the 5 option on the perimeter. And he should be able to be much more efficient as a scorer and playmaker now than when he had to create so many shots in Detroit over the course of the last 2 years. I think this is a deal where if you told me Tobias Harris is shooting 40% from 3 on like 6 attempts per game next year, and then like averaging like 14, 15 points a game on a great team, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I think this is a good role for him. I think it's a good spot for him. I understand what San Antonio is doing here in terms of just continuing to add depth. Interesting part of this is, what do they do with Keldon Johnson now? What is Keldon Johnson's role? Because regardless of who they start, Sam, I don't even think that necessarily matters, even though I do continue to find that one of the more fascinating questions around the best teams in the NBA. But for this, it doesn't matter. Let's just say Tobias Harris starts. Now you're bringing Dylan Harper and Julian Champagnie off the bench already. Depending on where they're at with Carter Bryant going into year 2, where is the role and where are the minutes for Keldon Johnson? That's a $18 million. I'm not saying they have to move him. I'm not saying they have to.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is I wonder, is there a play here? $18 million expiring. Does everybody stay happy? Is there a better... I just wonder. My mind went there in terms of
should the Pistons do a sign-in trade for Tobias Harris and Keldon Johnson?
Sure.
They have to give up value, obviously, but I wouldn't like totally hate it. The thing that I will say here is that, look, I know they just signed Harrison Barnes to a 1 year, $8 million deal,
though, consistently.
But yeah, like Harrison Barnes played 2,000 minutes last season, right? And even if you think Dylan Harper is going to play more than 1,600 minutes, which he's definitely going to play more than 1,600 minutes, there's still like 1,500 minutes for Keldon Johnson next year, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I think that he'll have the same role basically that he had this past season, where he was at 1,900 minutes. Even if he's down at 1,500 minutes and playing, instead of 23 minutes a night, he's playing 20 minutes a night, which is possible. Like, wouldn't surprise me. I still think there's like a pretty easy role there for Keldon. And the big thing for me is that with Keldon and with Harrison Barnes on the contracts they are now, that's like $26 million in expiring money or so. And that puts them in a big, like, we could go make a relatively large swing on the trade market situation if we wanted to.
Nope, that's good perspective. That was good little exercise to go through for me. Seems like you're probably right that there's still going to be plenty of minutes for Keldon Johnson. I will still say, and you just made this point, but they have some nice contracts to move if they need to do so. Between Keldon's 18, the expiring contracts, if they need.
They have the Cornet expiring too. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So they can. They're not in the market to me for a $40-50 million player, right? But if they needed to go get, Keldon and Luke Cornet get you to 28, or whatever. You have some options there on expiring deals. So
yeah, no, that's right. Definitely right. The interesting question now is just like, when does the Wembanyama extension get done at the end of the day? So we'll see
that one
how
should
that
be easy.
Yeah, 30% max. Great. We'll lock it in. Thanks, Vic. Okay. Do you know what the crazy thing is, Bryce? Can you imagine if Victor Wembanyama misses like 25 games at the start of the year with a hamstring injury or something, and then just comes back in March and dominates, and then they win the title, and he's on a 25% max because of the stupid way that the NBA rules work?
I wasn't going to put it into the world, Sam. It ran into my head, and I was just going to let it run right out without bringing it up so Spurs fans wouldn't yell at us, but there you go.
Oh, I think Spurs fans would be ecstatic. Are you kidding me? Missed 25 games in December for him to be on a 25% max versus a 30% max. That's the perverse incentive that the NBA has created with this entire ecosystem, is that a Spurs fan isn't out of their realm to be like, oh yeah, if Wembanyama misses 20 games in December, who cares? Like, that's great.
And
amazing.
The thing is, they have Luke Cornet and Terrace Reed Jr., and they're going to be able to survive those games. Those guys aren't Victor Wembanyama. I want to be very, very, very clear, but they're going to be able to survive those regular season games with the depth they've built at the big position as well.
No question. Okay. Next, let's go to Marcus Smart, 2 years, $13 million for Houston. As long as he stays healthy, I think that this deal is one of the best values we've seen in free agency so far.
Yeah.
Because he's like the perfect player to where, oh yeah, if Reed Shepherd becomes an awesome basketball player and really steps up in the way that they think he's capable of, Marcus Smart can play with him. That's great. if Fred VanVleet is healthy again next year and is like 100% and everything goes great after his knee injury, Marcus Smart can play with him. That's amazing. Or if neither of those guys are ready to go, Marcus Smart can play point guard and you can roll Marcus Smart, Alperen Şengün, Kevin Durant, Jabari Smith, and Amen Thompson out there in a lineup. And that's like not out of the question and not out of the realm of something that can work. I think this is a home run deal for the Houston Rockets. This is an amazing, amazing, amazing contract and fit for what they need.
Yeah. I had a good season last year. You mentioned the defense. Sounds like there's a player option on the second season of this one, but just that average annual value right around $6.5 million over those 2 seasons. Think it makes a lot of sense for the Rockets. Really, really good addition.
Kelly Oubre. Also, by the way, before we get to Kelly, Marcus Smart reteaming with Ime Udoka, playing in a scheme where they switch a lot, like consistently defensively if they want to, like a lot of switchable players on that team as well. I think that's like an amazing, amazing situation for Marcus Smart. Kelly Oubre, what 2 years, 17 million?
17
for Kelly Oubre.
Yep, 17.
He is the Ben Mathurin replacement. It will likely be half the price of Ben Mathurin, right? So Kelly Oubre averaged 14 points, 5 rebounds, 1.5 assists per game last year. Shot 47, 36, 77. He is an interesting defender insofar as there are some real lapses, but he is really good at getting through screens. He is somewhat effective on the ball. He can't match up with everybody on the court, but he's pretty good at dealing with guards by and large. I think he's a really good bench player for the Pacers, and this is a good, solid upgrade at, again, what will likely be half the price point of what Mathurin got. So I would imagine that now what this leads to, for what it's worth, is going to be, because they have paid him, I think, more than what the taxpayer mid-level will be. They have to make some sort of move with somebody like Obi Toppin, Jarris Walker. I guess you could maybe move like Shepherd and another player and get under the threshold that they need to. But because they have paid him more than the taxpayer mid-level, it says to me that they're planning on not being a tax team moving forward.
Yeah. Also a player that gets a ton of deflections defensively. So just the disruption there. He's tops in the NBA this past season, just in deflections per game. As you mentioned, the defense can be a little bit frustrating at times, but I think this is fine. I'm okay with this in terms of a guy that comes in, will come off the bench for them for sure. The 3-point shooting and floor spacing, I don't know. Even for me, I have to remind myself that it's not nearly as good as sometimes what I think it is. He is coming off the best season of his career in regards to that, but fine deal for the money and a rotation player for this team.
Yep. Santi Aldama gets traded to the Dallas Mavericks for, I want to pull up the exact price point. AJ Johnson is in this deal. A protected 2030 Warriors first round pick that is 1-20 and then turns into a second, if not conveyed. And then I think they got 2 seconds as well in this trade. The other name that I'm going to point out here is that the Grizzlies also traded Tarek Baberovic to the Dallas Mavericks. Baberovic is somebody that people across the league think actually could come over to the NBA at some point. So if you wake up one morning and see that Tarek Baberovic has signed a real contract with the Dallas Mavericks, like, don't be totally stunned by that. He is not your typical throw-in from just like a draft rights perspective. He is somebody that people across the league are actually interested in, playing for Fenerbahce, averaging like 12 points per game and having consistently drilled somewhere between 42 and 47% from three over the course of the last 3 years. So at least worth bringing that up as like a real value add for this on Dallas's front, because when I looked at this deal initially, I was like, oh, this is like way too much for Santi Aldama. But if it's Santi and Babarovic and they signed Babarovic, I actually think that is probably about what the price point should have been.
And the protections, you said it's a Warriors, but it's protected 1 through 20.
Protected top 20.
Yeah.
And transitions into a second. So, it could be a good pick. It could be, 3 second round picks here. So
this is, as we mentioned earlier, where not all of these first round picks are exactly the same. And you do have to get the details on them before we make judgments on them and analysis and all of that. Initial reaction is somebody's getting moved off this Dallas Mavericks roster between the additions of Merez Johnson Jr. and Santi Aldama. Just curious if that's going to end up being Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, or PJ Washington. It doesn't seem like all of these guys make sense on a single roster where the minutes come and all of that. So my attention immediately went to what's the next move that Dallas is going to make. Do they have something lined up for a PJ Washington or a Daniel Gafford? Maybe they don't. Maybe they're just going to play really, really big and find a way to get all of these guys on the floor. But that was my thought.
Look, we don't know if Derek Lively is available, right? If I had told you that Dallas would do the unprotected Lakers 2031 first round pick for Derek Lively, given everything that they now have on their roster and given his injury question, like Derek Lively is like a pretty real injury question moving forward with his foot. So like this would be a not insubstantial risk for the Los Angeles Lakers. Like Walker Kessler is a way safer option, even though Walker Kessler has his own games played issue that we didn't really talk about at the top for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Would you have rather done Derek Lively for one of those picks in none of the swaps or Walker Kessler?
I thought Derek Lively was really, really good. We just haven't seen him get back to that level yet because of the injury.
Yeah.
The draft capital that you're presenting,
it's a lot, Bryce.
Is a lot. Lively's contract is good right now, but you are going to have to deal with extending him. Probably not now, but next offseason, he would be in restricted free agency. It would truly come down to the medicals and what I thought about his health. That would be a massive, massive part of this, because that is just a huge bet on a player who hasn't yet played 100 games in his career.
Yeah, and to be clear, Derek Lively still hasn't even progressed to being able to run yet, according to Christian Clark at our site.
Yeah,
so for what it's worth, I wouldn't have done this. I was just bringing it up as a
too much
thing, right?
Too much uncertainty right now.
I think there's too much uncertainty surrounding Derek Lively to be able to make that move. Okay. Some smaller moves to finish up. The Orlando Magic have brought back Jonathan Isaac. They have brought in Nikola Vucevic, and they're re-signing Jevon Carter. They're just bringing the band back together, folks. They're playing 5 out. I will say that. I like bringing in Vooch at what I assume is a cheaper number than what Mo Wagner got. Vooch can definitely shoot the ball. I'm interested to see what it looks like under a new offense with Sean Sweeney. I think there's a chance it could look really good for what it's worth. I'm interested to see how it plays out, Bryce, because Orlando is basically running this back, which is kind of what we expected, I guess.
Oh, there it is. Sorry, I was trying to find the numbers. But yes, Vooch, all these guys look like they're back on vet minimums, I think. And Mo Wagner got 2 for 18, 2 for 19. So definitely a smaller number for Vooch. Interesting to add the floor spacing element from him. Interesting that they were able to get Jonathan Isaac back. This is really going to come down. The Magic, I'm not saying their offseason wasn't important. Obviously, there were some decisions to be made. To me, it's the coaching change and being healthy and seeing how this all looks together with the top of that roster. But some depth signings here for them.
Yep. Okay. Mo Wagner to the Nets, 219 with a mutual option. Shout out to the, to everyone getting these mutual options now. We're just going crazy with it. Let's have some fun.
Yeah.
I don't think this one is structured. My read is that this one is not structured the same as the Keon Ellis mutual option, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Well, I'll probably get a call after this if I am, but 219, sure. Spacing big, who could help their players develop. I have no real issue with this. I do think Day'Ron Sharpe is a better player than Mo Wagner. I will at least say that. So I would expect that Day'Ron Sharpe is still their starting center.
But they had room to add another big with the Nick Claxton trade to the Chicago Bulls. So adding somebody like Mo Wagner on this deal with the mutual option on year 2 to give some depth at the center position, I think is perfectly reasonable. I'm with you. I would still start Day'Ron Sharpe. The upside, now is the time for the Nets to find out and give him those minutes and give him that role and give him that opportunity. But having a backup like Mo Wagner makes perfect sense for this team.
Yep. Final deal here. DeAnthony Melton back to Golden State on the biannual exception. So this does not impact, it impacts it from a financial perspective. They would really actually have to get rid of Moses Moody if they're planning on bringing in LeBron James on more than the taxpayer mid-level. But yeah, we are in a place where DeAnthony Melton is back with Golden State. Your thoughts?
We've talked about this with the Warriors in terms of the potential depth that they will have on this team. And DeAnthony Melton coming back just adds to that. So I know it's not one that's going to hit the headlines for the Warriors in general, but I think that this was a nice move for them. I think it was important to continue to have that depth around the rest of the roster. So I like this. Good move for the Warriors. Player option on year 2.
Yep. And before he had shot 29% last season, in the previous 5 years, he had actually shot 38% from 3. So yeah, I know he shot 29 from 3 last year. I would bet you it's going to be much better moving forward for him as a shooter. Yeah, good player. Was really useful for them last year. He's a super deflections getter. He is effective on defense and by and large just knows where he's supposed to be and is a really good basketball player. So this is a good deal, I think, for DeAnthony Melton.
Yep.
Okay. That's all we have. Those are all the signings that I have, Bryce. Did I miss anything?
So that's what I was trying to do, was go through my Google sheet here of names. We didn't talk about Ariel Hookporty for the Sixers.
Shout out my guy, Ari. What an icon. Ariel Hookporty. Melbourne United legend. He's going to be the third string center for the 76ers. So shout out to Ariel Hookporty.
Not a somewhat valuable position for the Philadelphia 76ers, to be honest, with Joel Embiid's injury history. So I assume that he's going to get some real playing time for the Sixers this year.
Spotrac has John Mobo with the Kings on a 2-way. Is that right?
Ooh. Mobo Kings. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Scotto reported John Mobo and Sacramento Kings. 2-way.
Yep.
Sure. Okay. I think Mobo's... I never really got the Mobo thing when he was coming into the draft, but I don't mind him as a two-way bet.
Yeah, on a two-way,
Especially-
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, with what's entering the league in the rookie class from a two-way perspective, I think that more teams should be taking a chance on vets like this, like quote unquote vets like this on a two-way. But yeah, I don't mind that.
Bogdan
Chucky Hepburn
Bogdanovic
back.
Real-
Bogdan Bogdanovic, that's a good one to
with the-
Houston.
with the-
Yep.
Yeah, with the Rockets, we didn't at least mention that whenever we were talking about the Rockets.
Yeah, because that happened last night. Sure, why not? Let's see what he can do moving forward. I do think that's everything, though. We're really scraping the bottom of the barrel. Bryce, we've gone for 2 hours. We have gotten everything. The plan for tomorrow for people. Bryce is out until like late night, if anything is to happen. Also, I'm having construction done in my office I'm having a bookcase made and everything like that. So my read is that we will probably not be live tomorrow unless LeBron signs. If LeBron signs, it's very possible that I'll have to create a makeshift office, and you guys might listen to some construction happening in the other room. If LeBron signs, we will cross that bridge when it comes to it. Hopefully he doesn't. If Jalen Duren signs with Detroit, maybe we'll cross that bridge. That's one where it would be like a real question, just to give kind of a leveler for everyone on what to expect from us tomorrow. My guess is that Friday we will end up going live. Probably sometime around 5 p.m. Eastern or 6 p.m. Eastern time would be my read. But just to kind of set where you guys can expect us, that's the plan. I'll have a scout coming out tomorrow on Walker Kessler over at The Athletic. I'm really excited to talk about that. I might end up having to talk about Jaylen Brown over at The Athletic because that one kind of came out of nowhere. But we appreciate everyone for coming through. We appreciate everyone for doing everything that they can do to support us over here at the podcast. Go to the Substack, Game Theory, samv.substack.com, as we mentioned earlier. Bryce, tell the people where they can find you and find your work.
Motor City Hoops on Twitter, Blue Sky, Motor City Hoops Substack. If you're interested in John Collins, I did a video breakdown over there. Game Theory Substack, as Sam mentioned, will continue to provide content from Summer League or the upcoming 27 and 28 draft classes. And right here, we appreciate all your support throughout the offseason previews, the NBA draft, and now all of these offseason free agent and trade lives. Tons and tons of support, which we appreciate very, very much. Thank you.
Yep. Awesome. We appreciate everyone, like I said, for coming through and supporting the show. I mean, the number of you that have been here hanging out with us as we talk through these lives and as we talk through everything that's going on and watches them back and everything. It's just crazy. We appreciate the support immensely. We will be back tomorrow at some point, or not tomorrow. We'll be back the next day, rather, at some point to talk more about what happens in the offseason and probably, when the dust settles, try and figure out where everything is heading for next season. But we appreciate everyone for hanging out. So until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.